Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close Up, election officials in Iowa are recounting races with razor-thin margins. We explain the process and when those results are due. A longtime pollster stepping away. Hear from J.N. Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close Up, election officials in Iowa are recounting races with razor-thin margins. We explain the process and when those results are due. A longtime pollster stepping away. Hear from J.N. Selzer after she announced her decision to end her contract with the Iowa poll and her response to Trump calling for an investigation over the results of her final poll. And Trump transition. The president-elect makes a quick swap for his attorney general pick. A look at the people tapped for cabinet roles in his new administration.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close Up.
Good morning and welcome to KCCI 8 News Close Up. I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. Election officials across Iowa are moving ahead with recounts that were requested in some of Iowa's closest races. 4 races went to recounts. The recount is finished in State Senate District 20. Republican challenger Mike Pike beat Democratic incumbent Nate Bolton. The race for Iowa's 1st congressional district also went to a recount. Republican incumbent Marionette Miller Meeks has a slim lead over Democratic challenger Christina Bohannon. Now, here's how this process works. In Iowa, recounts are done by a special board. Each candidate gets to appoint someone to that board, and then they have to agree on a neutral 3rd member. If they can't agree, the chief judge in that county will appoint a 3rd person. The recount board will decide whether the recount is done by hand or machine counted. The county auditor's office oversees the process from there. One of the races that went to a recount is State Senate District 14. That's in Dallas County. Dallas County Auditor Julia Helm says state law requires the recount to be done quickly.
It needs to be completed no later than December 2nd. Does the board need to reconvene and report? The recount board needs to report to the Board of Supervisors through me, and then we need to report that to the state.
The recount board only has to count the votes for the races where a recount was requested. And all 4 of the Iowa races that went to recounts were close enough that the state will foot the bill. Well, in Washington, President-elect Trump has been busy selecting staff for his next administration, including high-level cabinet positions. That does include posts to carry out foreign policy. Allegations against Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz caused him to remove his name from consideration. Trump then named a new pick, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. She was also one of Trump's lawyers during his first impeachment trial and supported him at his hush money trial, showing a key trait Trump says he wants for the job is loyalty. Former Congressman Matt Gaetz has withdrawn as the president-elect's pick for Attorney General, following scrutiny over a federal sex trafficking investigation. The Florida Republican made the announcement Thursday. This comes after he previously met with several lawmakers on Capitol Hill alongside Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Meanwhile, a newly released police report alleges Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary nominee and former Fox News personality, sexually assaulted a woman in California in 2017. Hegseth told police at the time that the encounter had been consensual and denied any wrongdoing. Last week, Trump tapped Linda McMahon to serve as Education Secretary. McMahon led the Small Business Administration during Trump's first term and is the founder and former CEO of WWE. One of Trump's campaign promises, closing the Department of Education and moving it back to the states. In a post on Truth Social, the president-elect says McMahon will spearhead that effort. Education experts say that would require help from Congress.
You could say, well, let's pass a law that eliminates the Department of Education and all the programs it administers. If you don't eliminate the programs, then you've got to put them somewhere.
Trump also named Dr. Mehmet Oz, the heart surgeon and former talk show host, to oversee the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services for more than 160 million Americans.
My friend, Dr. Mehmet Oz, he's a great man. Dr. Dr. Oz, I've known him a long time. His show is great.
Oz does not have any prior experience leading government institutions. He lost his bid for a Pennsylvania Senate seat in 2022. Trump also chose Howard Lutnick, his transition co-chair and banker, as Commerce Secretary, a key role in an administration that Trump has promised will enact sweeping tariffs. And Iowa native Matthew Whitaker was nominated by Trump to serve as the U.S. ambassador to NATO. Whitaker has no apparent diplomatic experience, but was acting Attorney General for the Trump administration and is the former attorney for the Southern District of Iowa. Trump tapped another ally, Peter Hoekstra, for Canadian ambassador. Hoekstra was ambassador to the Netherlands during Trump's first term, a member of the House from Michigan, and most recently the chair of the state's Republican Party. Lawmakers screening these nominees usually have an FBI background check to consider. Trump's transition team has not signed the agreements to start those checks. It's relying instead on its own resources to vet personnel. That means the Senate could vote on Trump's picks without the usual third-party report that reveals personal problems, criminal histories, and other red flags.
As part of this process, the Judiciary Committee will closely review President Trump's nominees.
Once Trump assumes office, he could order his nominees be given a security clearance. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, in a social media post, predicted Bondi will be confirmed quickly, calling her a, quote, touchdown, slam dunk, gold medal pick. Still to come, we take a closer look at how Iowa school districts are adapting to a new state law aimed at keeping kids at school. The changes being made and which districts are seeing some improvements. But first, a longtime pollster is stepping away from the Iowa poll. What led to her decision and her response to President-elect Trump slamming her on social media. Longtime pollster Jan Selzer is not renewing her contract with the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll. People across the country often referred to Selzer's polling as the gold standard because of her long record of accuracy. More than 30 years of polling led to an A+ rating in Nate Silver's analysis of pollsters' track records of accuracy. Selzer earned that rating in Silver's first list, and her grade never dropped. But her last poll of the presidential race was a major miss, showing Kamala Harris ahead of Trump in Iowa days before the election. Unofficial election results show Trump won Iowa by 13 percentage points. Selzer first worked with the Iowa poll back in 1987. She later started her own firm and has worked on the poll on a contract basis since 1997. I talked with Selzer about her career, her polling methodology, and why she's decided to now step away.
It clearly wasn't the way I imagined this might be.
After roughly 3 decades of work, pollster Jan Selzer is stepping away from election polling. What was it that led you to want to step away?
It wasn't any one thing. I have worked with wonderful clients. The work itself is very intense for a period of time, and the number of hours that go into it, it just carves out whole chunks of my calendar to do it.
Her decision comes after her final poll of the presidential race showed Kamala Harris leading Trump in Iowa days before the election. Donald Trump went on to win the state by 13 percentage points.
Embarrassing is a strong word, but I don't know a better word for it. It's a difference. It's a miss. It's a spectacular miss. And I've never seen anything like it in my experience of 30 years worth of polling.
Trump criticized Selzer on social media Sunday, writing that her poll, quote, caused great distrust and uncertainty at a very critical time, that she may have committed, quote, possible election fraud, and that, quote, an investigation is fully called for. What's your response to that?
You know, my response is that to accuse someone of election fraud, you're accusing them of a crime. And they've offered no evidence that there was anything fraudulent going on. What the Register and I have done is put out more data about how that poll came together than any other poll I've ever seen.
The Des Moines Register released the Iowa poll's full questionnaire with weighted and unweighted responses. They included information about who they contacted, including a breakdown by age, gender, religious and political beliefs, race, and economic status. They also released 145 pages of the poll's crosstabs. That shows what different kinds of people think about the same question.
The idea that I made up data is there certainly isn't any piece of evidence that would suggest that. And there's evidence to the contrary that I used the same method that led to our poll showing leads that were highly accurate the first two times that Donald Trump ran in Iowa.
Selzer says she's used the same polling methodology since 2008, when she correctly spotted a surge that propelled Obama to victory in the Iowa caucuses. As other pollsters changed their processes over time, Selzer stuck to hers.
There was no urge to change because it had worked with remarkable accuracy before that. But, you know, I said one day it won't work, and then my poll will blow up and land in little sparkles across the city of Des Moines. Well, it wasn't that dramatic, but what I foretold could happen did happen.
Selzer also released a 19-page review of her most recent poll, investigating what went wrong. She worked through 7 possible explanations, but did not find any one clear answer for what caused the major miss.
Are you still kind of searching for answers on how that ended up being such a big miss?
It would be very hard to turn my brain off of doing that kind of thinking. So, you know, even this morning I'm thinking, you know, I wonder if our likely voter screen was too stringent. So if you've already voted, we take you, because not only likely, you're complete. And then on a 4-point scale, you need to tell me you will definitely vote. That is the strongest. If you say you'll probably vote, you might or might not vote, probably not vote, we don't take you. And I can't go back and say, well, what if we'd interviewed the probables?
She's hopeful that data from the Iowa Secretary of State's office could shed more light.
I'm eagerly awaiting the work that the Secretary of State is enmeshed in right now to gather in the actual data on how the vote went down. And that's not going to happen for a couple of months, but I intend to be among the first in the door to analyze that.
But Selzer says the poll's miss is not the reason she's stepping away.
And I have to remind myself of the difference between a correlation, that is two things happening at the same time, and causation, one thing making another thing happen. This plan for me to step back from election polling had been in the works for years. I'd had several conversations with Carol Hunter, who's the executive editor of the Des Moines Register. She well knew of the plan that my contract that ended with the election would not be renewed. So all of that had preceded, but of course the correlation looks like causation. Which it is not.
She says she's enjoyed work outside election polling.
Maybe it's a low-income housing outfit on the East Coast, and they've never trusted the data that they've been gathering on their own. So they call me up and we do a project and end up with ideas for them and thoughts about how they might structure things differently. Maybe it's a grocery store chain who was closely held and therefore really relying on the hunches of their board of directors rather than gathering quality data to take a look. That kind of work was very rewarding, and being available to do more of that just has a nice fit for me.
And she's still exploring plans for her next chapter.
I'm in the process of contacting people and talking about ideas. There's some things I'd like to do that are different from what I've been doing. Doesn't everybody kind of want to change at some time?
Following Selzer's announcement, the executive editor of the Des Moines Register, Carol Hunter, released a letter from the editor writing, quote, "We recognize the need to evolve and find new ways to accurately take the pulse of Iowans on state and national issues. Our intention is to reimagine how to best capture public sentiment and opinion among Iowans to provide valuable and accurate insights into legislative issues and politics." Coming up next, renovation or relocation, the two options for Polk County election officials after the discovery of structural issues in their current spot. Welcome back to Close Up. Polk County supervisors are looking into possible structural problems with the 102-year-old building that currently houses its elections office. County officials say some of the walls have cracks, which means it may need structural work or the office may move altogether. Our Bo Bowman has more.
Long lines can always be found at the Polk County Elections Office in the early voting window. This year, the line went all the way around the block, ending at 3rd and Court. If the office moves, Polk County Administrator John Norris says it could cut down on wait times.
If we put X amount of dollars in that building, is it worth it when we get done?
The main reason for the project, the county discovered cracks in the walls of the building. Norris says the county will hire a structural engineer to inspect it and then weigh the options of renovating or relocating.
We're going to do a deeper dive into the structure of the building to see if it makes sense to invest in rehabbing it. We'll compare that to the value of the building and the real estate to see what's the best economic decision here.
Norris says within the project, they'd also like to increase security within the building. Just last year, someone attempted to break into the office right before the 2023 local elections.
If in fact we keep the building, we do the whatever kind of structural repairs necessary, we move some of the offices up to the 3rd floor, then the redesign of the 1st floor where the public comes in to vote, we'll certainly do a security analysis as well.
That was our Bo Bowman reporting. And Polk County supervisors are expected to make a decision on what to do with this within the next 6 months. That could be a renovation or a relocation. Last week, Polk County supervisors revealed the details of a new naming rights contract for Hy-Vee Hall. Starting in the new year, the exhibition hall will be called EMC Insurance Expo Center. EMC's agreement with Polk County is for 10 years. EMC will pay more for the rights each year. In the first year, EMC will pay $500,000. That goes up to $525,000 in year 2. For years 3 through 10, the company pays an escalated 5% per year. Hy-Vee held the naming rights for 20 years. It paid a total of $8 million over that time. Casey's will be paying even more money for the naming rights just right across the street. The company will pay $1.4 million its first year to rebrand Wells Fargo Arena as Casey's Center. It goes up to $1.6 million in year 2 and then jumps by 4% a year until year 10. That name change will begin in July of next year. Battling chronic absenteeism in Iowa schools. After the break, what's working and what isn't with a new state mandate. Welcome back to Close Up. KCCI has been tracking the impact of a new statewide attendance policy that went into effect this fall. We're also looking at the changes some school districts are already making. As Bo Bowman reports, it's led to some confusion for parents and in some cases charges from the county attorney's office.
That's important.
Those parents we talked to in August were still learning the new rules. If a student misses 10% of school days, the school needs to meet with the student and the parent. An attendance plan could be put into effect. If the absences reach 20% of days in a grading period, like a quarter, it's considered truancy. Schools then send a certified letter to parents and can refer cases to the county attorney's office.
So in our first term, we sent 328.
Waukee School Superintendent Brad Buck says it's been a challenge making sure parents and students know what's considered an excused absence and what is not.
A lot of the first term has really been about getting the system up and underway, helping staff understand, and really helping our families understand what these changes are and what they mean.
Waukee has already made some changes to its attendance policies, still in line with state law. Originally, college visits were not considered an excused absence. Moving forward, they will be.
It could also be if you're investigating something with the military, if you're investigating a trade school, so if you're doing anything to investigate your options beyond your high school experience, we're allowing that to be exempted this time.
Funerals and religious events will also be considered excused absences. Superintendent Buck says it's an important effort, but a tough one to put into place.
When the legislature ran this and they said you've got plenty of money to do this, it has turned into a bit of an unfunded mandate locally, and not just Waukee.
Josh Brown, president of the Iowa State Education Association, has heard from administrators across Iowa. He says the law is an example of government overreach.
The amount of time being dedicated to trying to figure out how to comply with the law has been frustrating to lots of administrators.
Brown also believes keeping kids in schools is important, but it should be left up to individual school districts.
That this was an example of some government overreach on an issue that if they would have allowed districts to provided districts with resources to address this issue, that local school districts, that educators, community members, and parents could have worked together to potentially come up with a better solution.
KCCI Investigates crunched the numbers at other area schools. Here are just a few. Dallas Center Grimes saw a small improvement in their first quarter compared to 2023. In Urbandale, less than 6% of students were absent in the first quarter, similar to last year. Des Moines, however, is seeing an improvement in attendance. It's up 4% compared to the last several years. We spoke to the Polk County Attorney's Office. They tell us they've received more than 3,000 referrals this school year.
The way that we prosecute these cases and the way that we work with truancy court is that everybody works together. The goal is to look at the root problems. How do we address the absenteeism? What do we do to remove some of those barriers?
Not every referral ends in charges, but even then,
the goal here isn't to prosecute a parent, to fine them or throw them in jail. Is to try to improve attendance.
Bo Bowman, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
As of last Tuesday, the Polk County Attorney's Office has charged 9 families. The Dallas County Attorney's Office has not charged anyone. Of the school districts we contacted, Des Moines had the most referrals to a county attorney with more than 1,600. That's followed by Waukee schools with 328, Johnston with 254, and West Des Moines schools with 203 referrals. Well, Thanksgiving is coming up. That means food is being prepared for the 40th Parks Community Thanksgiving dinner. Bob Iverson has been head chef of the Des Moines tradition for the last 30 years, but he retired last year. This year, the owners of Chuck's are stepping in. We checked in with Emily and Luke Jones last week while they were hard at work getting things ready. The couple will be dishing out more than 2,300 meals this week with the help of volunteers.
A little bit difficult, but at the same time, like she said, a lot of people already know what they're doing, so it's not going to be too bad.
People will not go away hungry. You might get double ham and maybe 2 pieces of pumpkin pie, but we're going to send you home with some food.
It's great to hear. Well, carry-out and delivery orders have already reached capacity. People, though, are welcome to dine in between 9:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. Organizers say they still need some apple pie donations. You can drop those off on Tuesday or Wednesday between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Next week on Close Up, I sit down for a candid conversation with the Food Bank of Iowa President and CEO Michelle Book. As she finishes out her leadership role with the food bank, she shares the challenges that she's faced fighting food insecurity over the years, plus the stories that have made the biggest impact on her throughout her career. Thanks for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. Have a great day and a very happy Thanksgiving.